Good evening and welcome to our latest episode of Sunday Night Mystery. Tonight we take you to Newtown and the year is 1993. Newtown was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, where secrets were whispers carried by the wind, and where the past felt as present as the morning mist that clung to the countryside. Yet, on March the 10th, 1993, the peace shattered like glass, and the whispers turned to screams. Richard Miles was dead. His body lay broken in the garden of the home he'd shared with his mother. A knife, cold, cruel, and far too familiar, protruded from his chest. The questions began almost immediately. Who had done this and why? But the answers were elusive, hiding in the same shadows that seemed to stretch longer and darker over Newtown as the days passed. Richard Miles was a man defined by routine, every day the same, every week predictable. But routine, like a mask, can hide fractures. Those who truly looked could see them in his eyes. Maybe a flicker of unease or a moment of hesitation, as if the ground beneath him was less solid than it had seemed. The last weeks of his life were marked by a subtle unravelling. At the garage, he worked with his usual precision, but his focus would drift, his hands lingering over a wrench or a cloth, as though time had slowed. In the evenings, his walks with Rusty grew shorter. He stopped staying late at the pub. His friends noted the change, but none dared press him for answers. What could haunt a man so deeply that it began to erode the structure of his life? Regret? Fear? Or the heavy burden of knowing something he shouldn't? The morning of March the 10th began unremarkably. Birds sang, the village stirred, and Richard slipped into the garage just past 10. He greeted his colleagues with a nod, but his words were sparse. At 1 p.m, he drove home, as he always did. But on this day, something or someone interrupted the monotony of his schedule. And by 3:30 p.m, Richard was dead. The scene his mother discovered was grotesque in its stillness. Richard lay sprawled in the garden, the handle of a kitchen knife gleaming in the weak afternoon light. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture or disarray, just the awful, clinical simplicity of violence. It was as if the killer had taken great care to ensure the moment's intimacy. A calculated act meant to speak louder than words ever could. But what was the message, and why deliver it to Richard? The investigation began with a sense of purpose, but it quickly became mired in contradictions. Every lead seemed to lead to another question, and every clue a dead end. Neighbours spoke of strange happenings in the weeks prior. There was a heated argument in January, the man storming from Richard's house with clenched fists and a face like thunder. A woman with a buggy was seen wandering toward the fields near his home the day of the murder. Her identity a ghostly question mark. And then there was the pale blue mountain bike, abandoned, just out of sight, a silent witness to something unseen. Yet it was the man on the towpath who haunted the village most deeply, a thin, unkempt figure with a dark, feral energy about it. His stare, described by a schoolgirl jogging past, was not just vacant but malevolent, as though he could see through her to her fears. The stain on his elbow, blood, mud, left an imprint on her memory she could never erase. Each detail was a thread, and the threads were endless, but the tapestry they wove remained incomplete. As the investigation stalled, speculation filled the void. To his friends, Richard was a simple man, kind but guarded. Yet the way his routine had frayed before his death hinted at something darker, a truth too burdensome for him to carry. Whispers began to circulate. Could he have been involved in something illicit? Had he seen something he shouldn't have? Was his work at the garage a front for a darker trade, stolen cars perhaps, or something even more sinister? Some theories turned inward, pointing not to Richard's deeds, but to his heart. Had he wronged someone close to him? Could the argument in January have been about a betrayal, an affair, or a debt that could never be repaid? Each possibility was more disturbing than the last, but none explained the precision, the intimacy, the sheer coldness of the act. Newtown changed in the wake of Richard's death. The village had once felt timeless, now seemed to belong to the past, its streets and cottages haunted by the memory of that day. For his mother, the grief was unrelenting. At night, she would sit in the garden where he'd fallen, whispering his name as though he might answer. She claimed to hear footsteps outside her window, the sound of a door creaking open, the faint rustle of movement in the hedgerow. Rusty, once so loyal and protective, grew restless, barking at nothing. It was as though the house itself had absorbed the violence. Its walls and floors soaked with the memory of that knife's plunge. And what of the killer? Were they still in Newtown, walking among the same faces, hiding behind the same polite smiles, or had they disappeared into the void, leaving behind only the echoes of their cruelty? Theories abounded, each more chilling than the last. Perhaps it was a crime of passion, a lover scorned, a jealousy that spiraled into violence, or perhaps it was a warning, the culmination of a dispute Richard had tried to escape. But the most unsettling possibility was almost the simplest. That Richard had been chosen at random. That his death wasn't personal, but a cruel act of control by someone who relished the power of taking a life. What kind of darkness lives in a person capable of such an act? And how does one survive knowing that such darkness might still linger, unspoken and unseen, in the very heart of their community? Richard Marles' murder remains a gaping wound in Newtown's history, a story with no ending, a question with no answer. What was it that brought violence to this quiet life? A debt unpaid, a love betrayed, or simply the cruel randomness of fate? And what does it mean for those left behind, who must live not just with the loss, but with the knowledge that the killer walks free? To this day, the shadows of Newtown hold their secrets close. The answers lie buried, perhaps in the hearts of those who were there, or perhaps, deeper still, in the dark recesses of the human psyche, the place where fear and violence take root. Because every shadow hides a story, and this one refuses to let go. If you have any information about tonight's or any of the cases that we feature, please contact your local authorities. Stay safe, and until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, and keep unraveling the mysteries of our world. Because time, like a merciless predator, marches on, leaving behind shattered dreams and broken promises. Yet, amidst those shadows of despair, glimmers of hope remain. Join us next time as we delve into another chilling mystery that continues to confound investigators and haunt communities. Until then, stay vigilant and never forget those who've been lost to the shadows. Until next week, stay safe. Remember, the truth may be hidden, but as long as we keep the investigation alive, it's never truly lost. I'm Brett, and I'll see you next time on Sunday Night Mystery. But for now, stay curious, stay vigilant, and be sure to guard yourself against the darkness that surrounds us all. I'll see you next week on Sunday Night Mystery.